Hi everyone, I'm Ebony Tara Scurry, the career architect, and you are watching Careercraft. I help people earn more money and have more freedom with a successful career by their own standards. From resumes to career
more than enough time to share all of her knowledge and her wisdom with us. So I'm going to do a quick intro, tell you a little bit about Ebony, what you may or may not already know about the great things that she's done and continues to do. Then I'll have some handouts I'm going to pass out, and then the floor will be hers. So real quick, I guess I should introduce who I am, right? I had to process it. It took me a minute, it took me a minute, but I caught it. So who am I, right? Who am I? So aside from my name tag here that you may or may not be able to see, my name is China Wilson, and I actually am a board member, specifically overseeing the Legislative Affairs Committee within MCDA, but I'm on the board as well, and stand before you today in that capacity. In addition to that, I also am in career services, of course, at Trinity Washington University as their director. And so, again, I stand before you in that capacity, but more specifically, let's focus on Ebony, now that you know a little bit about who I am, and I'll slip into a quick introduction and move forward. Ebony believes career development is not about being a passive bystander to your career. She also most recently embarked on a new adventure as the host of a once-a-month YouTube show called Careercraft, where she answers career-related questions and discusses hot topics in employment and in work. So without further ado, we present to you Ebony Tara Scurry, and I'm actually going to, as she gets started, pass out the handouts for today's session.
Without further ado, one thing that this session is about, it's not about federal resumes, it's not about even federal cover letters. This is just about federal government strategy, because this is more of an advanced class, okay? I'm speaking to you from the point of view of, you already know what a federal resume is, you know how it's different from the private sector, you know all those things. You've already worked with clients who have been in the federal government or who are trying to get in. This is about, once that client has decided to do that, after you've completed their resume and help them with whatever it is, this is about higher level strategy. How can they move up when they're already in? And if they already have some kind of foot in the door, how can they get a formal position in the government, like if they're a contractor and so on. So we'll talk about that. And in the last couple of years, within the Obama administration, there's been some pretty significant changes in the federal government in terms of how they hire. We have something called the Pathways Program. There's also been hiring reform, which has changed so that instead of having to complete these long paragraphs of KSAs, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just submit your resume. You don't have to go through the builder, the USA Jobs resume builder. But the thing is, even though KSAs are no longer required in terms of those paragraphs, you still have to demonstrate on your resume and or cover letter that you still have those KSAs. So now you just have to incorporate them in a different way. And for some people, it's harder to how do you actually do that. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. All right? So again, this is helping your clients move into and upwards in the federal government. And we're going to jump right into the content because we only have about an hour. And if you have any questions as we talk, just bring them on, okay? Just come, let the questions come as they come. There's no PowerPoint. I don't need PowerPoint. All right, it's a tool. But we do have these handouts for you, and I have some other visuals that I'm going to use to help solidify the points that we're going to learn today. The first thing in terms of helping your clients move into and upwards in the federal government is work details. Who's heard of a work detail? What is that? Yes. That's right. Wow. Yeah. I'm glad you learned something in the first 5 minutes, right? Yes. So for those of you, did everyone hear that a little bit? Okay. So in your name, Audrey?
My name is Audrey.
Audrey said that, and she's absolutely correct. A work detail is when someone who's in one department goes to another department to work at a job. They may not be qualified for that job. The point is it's a detail. They're going over there to learn or to help out. And sometimes they are qualified. Maybe if that area needs some help and that person has a certain skill set, then they will detail that person over there to help. Or if, let's say, that person wants some experience, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to qualify for that job, they can do a detail to learn it. So then they then have those skills that later they can apply for a position. And sometimes those people will stay at the detail indefinitely, and sometimes they'll leave after 30, 60, 90 days.
That's often referred to as a TDY, temporary duty assignment.
Yes.
It's also almost like having an internship.
Yeah. But you get paid.
It is paid. And let's say if you're in a certain department, and you go somewhere else, even though you're helping that other department, your current position is paying you. The other place isn't paying your salary.
Right.
So there's a lot of politics that go around. Why am I paying you but you're helping them? What's that about? So we'll talk about that. And you said there's another term for it,
TDY, and I think it stands for temporary duty.
Tour of duty.
temporary towards duty.
Yeah.
Temporary toward duty?
Yeah. So depending on the agency, it can be called different things.
And then there's joint duty assignments, like if you go work for another agency, the idea is that you are bringing back ideas from the other agency back to your home base. So
Yes.
some people can go on a joint duty assignment, you're still being paid by your home agency, and they say, okay, go off for 6, 9 months, sometimes even a year, but they know you're gonna come back and bring, that wealth of knowledge back to that agency.
That's right. So, and your name again?
I'm sorry,
Dana?
I'm Dana Devance, yeah.
Dana?
Department of
Thank you.
Justice.
Thank you. So one thing that Dana said that wasn't mentioned quite yet is that details are not just within the agency. You can detail to a completely different agency. Okay? Now that tends to happen less often because details can be a political savvy kind of thing that we'll talk about. So you tend to know people within your agency. But many times you can detail to a completely different agency. And again, it may be to a different agency, but it'll probably be within the same department. Like let's say Department of Health and Human Services, that's a department. Within that department, there are many federal agencies. You've got FDA, NIH, and so on. So it's easier to do a detail if you're going to go to different agencies within your department. Does that make sense? And it's easier than that to do it within your agency to a different office. You see? Okay. And this matters. Because depending on your client's situation, you want to make it as easy as you can to help them to get the experience. Because another agency may have an HR department, but if your current one does, why do you need to go all the way over there? So it really depends on if that other agency, if they're doing something innovative that your agency isn't, or there's a skill set over there that you can't get where you are, and you do need to bring it back to your agency, it can make sense to go to another agency. So a detail. So we explain what a detail is, so we know what that is. It's kind of like an internship. You do get paid. You may have the experience in that field already, and you may not. So it depends. Another thing that's interesting about details are some details are posted where it's sent out to everyone at the agency, and whoever wants to can apply. And then there's other details that it's not put out there. It's inexistent. You have to create it. So some agencies do one or the other, and some may do a little bit of both. And so that's something to know. Now, why would your clients even care about details? Remember, this is about moving up within the federal government, and we said it's kind of like an internship. What do internships help you do? Get experience, get exposure, be able to network with other groups and areas that you may not have a chance to where they currently are. So it helps them to get that experience. So let's say that you've met with your client a few times and you know that their next career goal is for whatever position. When you look at the vacancy announcements that show what's required, your client doesn't need it because of they lack certain experience. A detail can be a way to fill in the gap. That's why it matters. If a detail is posted, okay, they can apply. That's fine. If it's not, if let's say they want to work in another office, how do you go about creating it? What is the first step? What do you do? Okay? That's where some of this political savvy comes in. And I could teach a whole class on political savvy, okay? But we're not going to go there today. But political savvy is networking, who you know, and even if you don't know people, getting to know people, okay? So it's making those connections, being deliberate about exposure. And one thing that I've seen people do is they think that, oh, as long as I get some exposure, that's going to help me to get to where I want to be. Not so. You can get exposure, but if what you're showing isn't high quality, then you might as well keep yourself sound. Does that make sense? Okay? And some people mistake it, and they think that, oh, if I just put myself out there, I get on this committee, that committee. You need to be on the top of your game when you put yourself out there. Otherwise, people see what you do and it's not good. So it's different. Make sure that it's a high quality exposure, and that's what you're reiterating to your clients. Okay? So let's say if there is a volunteer opportunity that your client wants to jump at, if they know that that's not their strength, they may want to wait for the next opportunity so that they can shine. Not where everyone can see them, flail. When you want to do a detail and it's not creative, you have to create it. And so you think about what your network is. Ask your client, what is their network? Who do they know over there? And if they don't know anyone over there, that they should ask their colleagues, do you know anyone over there? Who's the person who does this or that? And put in a good word for them. And usually what happens is, okay, so let's say that I'm in the Human Resources Department. I'm in Labor Relations, Employee Relations. I want to get experience in the training department. I don't know anyone in the training department. So I go to my friend, or I even go to my boss or someone who I know and say, hey, do you happen to know who the managers or team leads are in that department? They'll say, yeah, I know them a little bit or so on. Can you send me an email introduction to them? Start by email, something soft. It can be a bit intimidating to go to someone in person the first time you ever see them sometimes. So a soft email introduction can be helpful. Say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about your area. I noticed that you guys are short-staffed in this area, here, there, and there. Now, how do you know that? Because you network. You know where they may be short-staffed. Or a lot of people don't want to say no to free help. So if you want to help, if you want to get a detail, make it that what's in it for me. How can I help you? So you want to let them know, hey, I'm looking to learn, but I want to help, and these are the skills that I bring, and so on. And then if that other area says, okay, well, we want this person, that supervisor over there will contact your client supervisor, and then they'll make it happen. Okay? Nowadays, there's a lot of budgetary issues in the federal government. They just don't have money for a lot of things. And they can't go to training, they can't, pay for this conference or that conference. So details are becoming actually more common. And when one area is short-staffed, sometimes they can't hire a contractor to fill that void if someone's on maternity leave or something like that, so they'll have someone else do a detail temporarily. So it's about keeping your antenna up, having your client keep their antenna up about what possible opportunities could be there. When your client does go on a detail, they should consider it like a probationary period. They're going there to learn, but they may also be going there to show what they've got. Because that may be their last opportunity to show those people in that area that, hey, this is the value that I bring. You'd want to keep it, especially if you want to stay there. Now, all details have a purpose. Some are good and some are to hide the bad, okay? And this is something I want to share with you, is that when a detail has a good purpose, it's for, let's say, someone over there, like I mentioned before, is on maternity leave. So they have a gap. That's a lot of work. And you happen to know that because you heard from someone else that they're on maternity leave, and you keep your feelers out there. So let's say you get permission to go over there. Now that's one step all in itself. How do you get permission to go over there? That's the big challenge for a lot of your clients. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to ask my boss to still pay me while I'm helping them over there. So you have to come up with a case of why it's beneficial to your boss for you to go over there. Okay, why is that? Now, let's say, because I know of a situation where a person was in a staffing and recruitment. They were recruiting positions for one of the intern programs the agency had. That intern went to the department where the program manager for those interns resided, and she did a detail with that program manager to learn more about the internship, so that when she went back to her recruiting job, she had more background information about the program. So she was able to say, hey, this is how it benefits me in my current position for me to go over there. You see what I mean?
What if it's totally different?
Yeah.
It's a different
Exactly.
job and
Mhm.
how do you feel about that?
It remember when I talked about it's easier within your office, agency, and so on. If it's, let's say, within human resources, okay, because I'm in HR. In HR, you have different offices. If it's in a good agency, they're not going to mind some cross-pollination. You probably see that anyway without details. People go into that office for a couple of years, they come over here. So it's all within OHR, and that's one of the arguments you can put up is, hey, you know, I'm trying to better serve in my area, and knowing the other areas will help me to better do my job here because of X, Y, and Z. And it'll be something you have to think about. If it's a completely different area, the reality may be that you just can't. You may not come up with a case to do that. So you have to be realistic with your clients as well.
Some of these details are usually, there are commonalities in the occupation and each is going to go to another area. Is that basically the easiest way to transition?
I like the word commonalities. For number one, it is easier when there are commonalities. Number two, if there are not commonalities, you have to create them. Okay? You have to convince them that there are commonalities where they may not see it. Or even if there are not there, you just make them up and make it sound like it makes sense. I'm serious, because this is what I do with my clients. They want to go from, you know, employee relations to the accounting department, because they don't like to work with people. They want to work with numbers. How do you make that work? Well, you know, in accounting, they, or in the budget office, they actually spend a lot of money on the attorneys who fight these employee relations cases. If I go over here, I can blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Exactly. You make a connection. You think hard and ponder and, you know, and meditate, and you find the commonality. Because, yes. And you'll have to document it because you'll need paperwork that you submit to your supervisor that says why you want to do this. And another thing that can help is a mentor, someone who you can talk to discuss what are some commonalities and how do you find out what that job even entails. Look at the job description. Look at what recent vacancy came out regarding that position, so that you can begin to look at some of the details that you may not be aware of. Because it's hard to find out the commonalities when you don't even know what the vacancy announcement looks like or the job description. But someone who's in that position at the moment may have had a copy of that description, or, you know, if that client has been doing good and keeping an eye out on that position, they should already have the vacancy announcement in their folder or something like that. I mean, you can ask for it too. Yes.
How, like, after someone does that detail, this is kind of new language for me, but, you know, how often is it that people do end up jumping into that office, and does that happen pretty quickly?
It's very common. Yeah. So
It varies agency to agency. We have like an open season sometimes where we post open positions and people can, you know, assign like maybe 30-day assignment, 60-day, 90-day. But typically most agencies will have a posting system.
So some will post and some will not, and the typical time frame is 30 to 60, 90 days. I've seen them for a year, and I've seen people in details for multiple years. It's less common for multiple years.
Yeah.
It tends to only go up to a year at the most, but generally it's 30 to 60, 90 days.
Are they at the same level too, grade level?
For the most part, yes.
They are.
Mhm.
Because if I wanted to go in an area, because I want to move up and I want to be a department head, can I do something like that?
You have to take a lateral to your
It has to
degree.
be lateral.
Yes. Now, sometimes if it's a temporary assignment, and that's one thing that's different from a detail. If it's a temporary assignment, you can have a temporary promotion, okay? And that's different from a detail. Details will be on your same level. I have a client who, she worked for the Census Bureau, and every time they would do the census, every few years, she would get a temporary promotion to the 14, because she'd be supervising a lot of their new staff. And then when that was over, she'd go back to her 13. She didn't want the 14 as permanent. She was offered it before. She didn't want it. But she took that temporary promotion for that time period and went back. And so that's a temporary assignment, which is different from a detail.
And are people doing both jobs at once? Like they might spend like 2 days here and then 2 days there, or is it like?
Lovely question. I love that question. Are people doing both jobs? Sometimes, and sometimes not. I've seen details where they'll do, okay, and this is one of the things you negotiate with your supervisor. Ideally, you want your client to go over to the other place full-time, ideally. Sometimes, remember, we talk about reality, that's just not the case. Their work, no one's going to be able to do it, and so on. So you can negotiate with your supervisor, hey, I want to do a detail, please let me do one for 2 days a week over there, and I'll stay here 3 days a week. And they may say, okay, that's all right. My very first federal job, I worked at the government printing office. I was assigned to an area, and I did that for a couple years, but I wanted experience in the other area, and my supervisor let me go there 1 day a week. And then it went into 2 days. And then eventually I ended up working at the other place full time. So it can happen. But I guess ideally the situation is go to the other place full time, because that's the point. That's what you're trying to do. But in that negotiation phase, sometimes you've got to negotiate. When I talk about the good and the bad, so yes, there's good reasons to do a detail. You want that extra experience, because let's say you want to get into employee relations, but you don't have the 12 months in grade. But if you do a detail, then you can apply for that and not have to take a pay grade lower. Does that make sense? So there's good reasons to do a detail. Or let's say that I've been working in staffing for 10 years, and the area over there needs help. I like where I am at now, but I want to show that I'm flexible and I'm willing to help the team and everyone. So I'll do a detail over there because my skills relate to that and they need help, and I'm going to show that I'm a team player, so I'm going to go. And plus I'll get to network with other people who I don't normally network with and all that stuff. And plus if I want to become director one day, it's good for me to have experience everywhere. So that's another good reason to do a detail. The bad. Okay? There are details where someone is a problem. You have a person who's a problem. They're a low performer, maybe they filed a harassment or a lawsuit against the agency. I've seen where there was an employee, they had filed a lawsuit against their supervisor, and so as part of the process of them moving forward with that litigation, they had to separate those two. So they said, oh, we're going to detail you to this other office while we're working this out, because you two can't be together right now because of the lawsuit, and it's going through employee relations, and it's pretty nasty. It's not a good thing. So then they send an email out to all the staff and say, hey, this person's doing a detail, congratulations. They paint it as something good, because they can't say that it's because of this bad reason. But sometimes it is for that reason. There's also where I saw where this young lady was hired, nice young lady, she was hired, and her sister was actually in the same office, but they had a different last name, and no one knew until they were hired. And based on the regulations, that was like nepotism or something, but they had hired her, and it would have been a harder problem to solve if they tried to get rid of her. So, hey, let's do a detail over there, and within that time frame, and she detailed for a year, we'll figure out what to do then. And after a year, she went back to the office for like a month, and then they found somewhere else to put her. Okay, so that's a detail that could be kind of for a bad reason.
So just to clarify, so when you do the detail, your GS level stays the same. It doesn't increase.
That's
So
correct.
you do a job at a higher GS level, but it stays at your old level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though you're learning or you're adding more value to the same level. Mm-hmm. And I say the good and the bad because of this. Depending on your agency, some agencies look at details as, oh, is she detailed? Something's going on. What's that about? I want to know. Do you know? Hey. In other agencies, it's, oh, great, she's learning or she's helping us out. And then some, it can be depending on the department within your agency, based on what their history is. You know, some offices within agencies, they just regularly do details on a regular basis because. In others, it's more rare. So it just varies so much. That's just something to be aware of, because your client may say, well, people say the details are bad, and you have to just push by that and encourage them to do the detail because it will help them in the long run. But just be aware of that kind of cloud over the head. Okay? So once your client decides where they want to detail and why, how do you support them for or applying for the detail? That's the big question. How do you do that? One thing that I do is I write scripts for them. You know, I'll say, okay, draft up, do your research, find out what this position is you want to go. What is that about? How do you learn more about the position? You could do an informational interview with the person who's in it or someone who has been in it before. You can find a way to get access to the vacancy announcement or the job description. There's lots of ways to find out about that position that you want to get or that you want a detail for, okay? Get that information. And then take a look at your own position, and if you ask your supervisor, can you do a detail over there, what are they going to say? What's going to be their barriers? Why would they say no? And then anticipate that and then come up with some language to counter that. If you know your supervisor is going to be worried about whatever project you have going on, be able to have something that you could say to help mediate that, okay? Or how are you going to show them that they should let you do this detail full time because it's actually going to help you where you are. Okay? I've also seen where there's a supervisor who doesn't like the employee and they're happy to get rid of them. Seriously, I've seen that. And there's times where the employee and supervisor have that understanding. I don't like you, you don't like me. Let's do a detail, get me out of here. I'm out of your hair.
Wow.
And they're happy to say sure. And then the person who they're going over to, oh yeah, this person's a good employee, yeah. Take them. And that's where you've seen people kind of go different places. Have you seen that? And then you don't know that they're a problem person until later. And I've also seen where the employee and supervisor, they don't like each other. And then when that employee goes somewhere else, they just exceed. They thrive. It's not always a good fit. And sometimes that's okay. It doesn't always have to be, fight. And so that's okay. So that's another reason. Just keep it honest if that's the situation that your employee is in. I'm trying to get out of your hair. You want me out? This is what I propose. Can we do this? That's where I tend to see the longer details. They'll detail them for like a year. While they and also, let's say if your client gets detailed for a year, during that period, what I advise my clients to do when it's that problem issue, because I've seen that a lot, I'm trying to get my clients out of a really toxic situation, because it's painful to watch your clients go through that. So they're honest and they get to their detail and they're like, yes. I'm like, no, don't relax now. Now what we're going to do is every vacancy that comes up that you qualify for, let's try to get you into that permanent job. So even though they're on that detail, they could still apply for a permanent job somewhere else. Does that make sense? But at least they're not dealing with the day-to-day painful, toxic situation that they're in. It gets them out of it so that they can have the mindset to even think about applying to jobs. Because sometimes it's just so stressful that they're consumed with whatever situation is going on at work. They don't even have the emotional energy to apply to jobs. So sometimes I've had to get them into details just to get them out of that environment to help them move forward. And you may find that as well sometimes. But know that this is a tool in your toolkit that you can use to help your clients. Encourage them to do a detail, get them out of the situation. Okay? So the detail may not even last a full year or even 30 days or whatever they can get it for. Because they may be able to get another position by that time. And that's okay. They can do that. Because the person who they've detailed to, depending on the situation, they may just be doing another supervisor a favor. Okay, bring them over here for a little bit, but, a little bit. Because, we don't really need them here either, but I'm doing you a favor. Sometimes it's like that. Okay? So that's the good and that's the bad. And that's a way that you can use details to help your clients as well. Okay?
Alles, was ich glaubte, was mir mein